Gray and Dahlia, what thoughtful divrei Torah. Gray, you took on the issue of negativity bias, seeing in the cloud that was constantly hovering over the heads of the Israelites the kind of cloud that might hover over our heads, making us see everything as more negative than it is. And Dahlia, you saw in the Parsha the value of asking for help. Moses, fatigued after so many trials and travails with the Israelites, pleads to God for help. And you see here not Moses as a weak and failed leader, but the very opposite. Moses is a model for what to do when we've reached our limits. As we all know, it is not easy to ask for help. As you taught us, it is not easy to ask for help. In fact, your two themes, Gray and Dahlia, they work together or in opposition, you decide, but they definitely work together. Often when we are feeling down or depleted, in crisis, or beyond our abilities, negativity kicks in. These are the very times when we might say to ourselves, no one cares about me, I'm all alone, there's nothing I can do, I have no hope. When our blood sugar's low, when we're in a very hot space, when we fall literally or metaphorically, when we feel embarrassed or ashamed, when we feel like a failure. In short, when we need help, that's the very time we are most vulnerable to negativity bias. And it is in that very moment that it is most important that we know about negativity bias so that we can counteract it. As you taught us, Grace, studies show that we pay attention to negative information more than positive information. Our brains respond more intensely to negative stimuli, and we think about negative events more than positive events after they happen. Negativity bias is thought to be an adaptive evolutionary response. In other words, focusing on threat helped to keep us alive once upon a time. When we know that this is how our brains work, and when we practice counteracting that bias in lots of ordinary moments, noticing and savoring the positive, checking negative thoughts against what's actually happening around us, we have a greater possibility of remembering in those low moments that the negative voice in our head does not reflect reality. By the way, even seeing the cloud that accompanied the Israelites through the wilderness as a negative symbol is negativity bias, because in the Torah it isn't negative at all. As you taught us, it only represents protection and God's ever-present care. And we're so used to linking clouds to sadness or confusion, grief or anger. We think about the cartoons with a black cloud over someone's head. It's natural you read it that way, even though our ancestors didn't experience it that way. For them, clouds were protection from the Sinai Desert's blazing sun. Here at CBE, we find negativity bias to be an ongoing challenge when it comes to chesed. Chesed is our congregation's effort to ensure that every member of our community is cared for when they need it, and that no one is alone when they are hurting or afraid or ill or dying or joyous and celebrating. We have hundreds of volunteers here who do things like deliver care packages and visit people who are older or homebound, and help to make a shiva minyan and offer homemade soup and organize meals for weeks, or even wash and prepare the body of a deceased loved one for burial. We even have a team called Solvers that's standing by to solve problems as they emerge, like changing a light bulb or finding the right care facility for a loved one or needing a prescription to be picked up. So what's the challenge? Only a very small percentage of our members ask for help. Most people don't even tell us when they're going through a hard time. Because when we're going through a hard time, it's so hard to believe that it's safe to need other people. We tell ourselves that people won't respect us as much, that they'll think we're needy, and this is negativity bias. It's not true. Helping is bonding. What's true is that when we give to someone else, we actually feel closer to them. People want to feel needed, and when we have the courage to admit that we need help, we allow other people to be needed. In the Parsha, as you taught us, Dahlia, Moses asks for help, and God tells Moses to choose 70 elders who will help him lead the people. And God then takes the spirit that's on Moses and distributes it to the 70 elders so that they can help. And then something really interesting happens. Two people who weren't among those 70, their names are Eldad and Medad, somehow they also start to prophesy, meaning that the spirit was somehow placed upon them as well. And Rashi, the 11th century French commentator, quoting Sifrei Bamidbar, he imagines that what happened was that there were 12 tribes. And so when asked to pick 70 elders, Moses wanted to be fair and picked 6 from each. That adds up to 72. And so Eldad and Medad were the two who were kind of chosen, but then were superfluous. And so they weren't needed, so they received blank lots. And they said to themselves, we must not be worthy of helping Moses. And so they stayed back in the camp when the 70 others went to the tent of meeting. But that's actually not how God saw it. God did not see them as superfluous. God knows that everyone is needed. And so God put the Spirit on them too, even though they were back in the camp. And when it became clear that they were prophesying, Moses realized that actually more was better. And he said, would it be that all God's people were prophets? In other words, he said, I need all the help I can get. This willingness to open ourselves to help, to sharing our burden, is really most often about courage. That's true individually and it's true collectively. A few weeks ago, Brooklyn celebrated Pride, LGBT Pride. And CBE was part of the Jewish community's contingent in the Pride Parade. And in the weeks before the parade, honestly, we were a little afraid. In response to the war, the LGBT community has included not just anti-Zionist voices, but also anti-Jewish voices. There's been some pretty bad anti-Semitism. What if we marched and people were mean to us, even hateful? Now note that this is not a sermon about the war, and I've given more than 20 of those and spoken out very strongly for both Jews and Palestinians to have safety and freedom and equality and self-governance, and I've spoken out very strongly over and over again for hostage return and the end of the war and humanitarian aid. This is one of my only sermons since October 7th, when I won't be speaking in any depth about the war, but you can find it all on our website if you're interested. So we were not sure what kind of reception we were going to get at the Brooklyn Pride Parade. I even made signs defending us against the hate that we anticipated. And on the day of the parade, I was dreading it, expecting to be booed and to face, well, negativity and bias. But that's not what happened at all. We marched down Park Slope's Fifth Avenue to unmitigated cheers. Not just general cheers for pride, but specific cheers for us. Our banner said Shabbat Shalom, and people got big smiles on their faces, and they said, Shabbat Shalom! And people shouted out, it's the Jews! And people called, yay, Jews! We were stunned. We were stunned. People like us? Non-Jews and the LGBT community have positive feelings about Jews? Well, yes. It turns out, yes, many do. We faced no hate at all, only love. We need to check our negativity bias, our negative expectations, not only as individuals, but also as a people. We need to keep open the possibility always for positive interactions and positive regard. We need to be willing to reach out to our non-Jewish neighbors and ask for help with anti-Semitism when we need help. We are not alone, even though sometimes we feel like we're alone. We are not alone. And sometimes others will want to help us. Last week I spoke about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC's groundbreaking dialogue about anti-Semitism with our member Amy Spitalnik and Stacey Burdett. It's 30 minutes long. You can Google it. You must watch it. It was groundbreaking, and I remain convinced that it was a turning point for American Jews. She understands, as she said, that anti-Semitism, quote, hate and violence against Jews because of their identity is real and it is dangerous. And, quote, when the Jewish community is threatened, the progressive movement is undermined. And, quote, anti-Semitism is on the rise in America and across the world, and acknowledging that fact does not take away from fights for liberation, it actually advances them. There are many, many more non-Jewish progressive leaders who can and must follow in AOC's footsteps. And the way they're going to do that is if we ask them directly for help. It is easier and less emotionally risky to close ourselves off and assume that everyone hates us, to not march in that parade in case we get booed. But the courageous thing to do is to turn to our non-Jewish progressive neighbors and say, the anti-Semitism's bad, and we need your help. And one by one, they will do what AOC did, and they will start to see that all progressive movements for change are strengthened when they incorporate an understanding of anti-Semitism and how it works, when they build it into their analysis about what needs to change in this country, and when they join forces with the Jewish community for a shared vision for America. The CBE community is seeing this happen with our own eyes right now. This Thursday, this week, we celebrated 3 years of partnership with Antioch Baptist Church in Bed-Stuy, a Black Baptist church. It was an exhilarating, triumphant night. Over 3 years, we've challenged one another directly to address racism and anti-Semitism. There were times when it got very difficult and even painful, but we promised each other we would not walk away. And now we've made it to the other side, and the love in the room is palpable. It is overflowing. And Thursday night, about 70 people from our 2 congregations ate and sang and even danced together and reflected on our 3 years so far, including all the experiences of praying together and getting into intense conversation together, and our trip together to Washington, D.C. and the African American History and Culture Museum and the Holocaust Museum, and our trip to Albany to advocate for the end of deed theft, including making a PSA about anti-Semitism directed by one of the Antioch leaders, including a peace concert, including a joint choir, Project Harmony, which made a music video called Heal Us Now, including a feature documentary film about our partnership, which is coming out this fall in film festivals all around the country. Recently, I needed help on something big related to the city, and I didn't know who to ask. And then I realized I needed to ask Reverend Waterman, the pastor of Antioch Baptist Church, to help me. After all of our marching together and leading together and struggling together and traveling together, you'd think picking up the phone and asking for help from him would be easy. But it was not. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed to ask. I was worried he would feel that I was taking advantage of him somehow, or that I was a burden. But right away he said yes, and he made calls on my behalf. And you better believe that the next time he needs something, I am so ready to be there for him. And that would have been true anyway, but I hope that now he feels a little more able to ask. This is what's next, Gray and Dahlia. You have given us exactly the personal challenge we all need. Get to know our negativity bias and learn to check it. Watch our resistance to asking for help and see if we can reach through it. Personally and collectively, we will all be better off if we can find that courage. Shabbat Shalom.